Jason Carter wasn't the type of guy people noticed right away. He blended into crowds with his gray hoodies, faded jeans, and quiet demeanor. He wasn't tall, nor did he have a deep voice that commanded attention. At 29, he worked at a logistics warehouse in Cincinnati, doing night shifts and keeping mostly to himself. But there was something about Jason that had started to change, something people around him were beginning to notice. A subtle shift, not in how he looked, but in how he carried himself. It began after a rough patch. A breakup with his girlfriend of 4 years. The loss of a promotion to a younger, louder coworker. And an incident at a bar where a stranger shoved him for looking weak. That night, as Jason walked back home with bruised pride and bleeding knuckles, he realized something. He had spent his life trying not to seem threatening, not to stand out, not to ruffle feathers. But the world didn't reward invisibility. It ignored it or walked all over it. So, Jason decided he was going to change. Not into a bully or someone full of false bravado, but into a man who radiated quiet danger. Not danger as in violence, but danger in the sense of unpredictability, strength, and confidence that others respected, even feared a little. He studied people, leaders, boxers, bodyguards, entrepreneurs, and even monks. And he noticed 4 behaviors that seemed to communicate one powerful message. This person is not to be underestimated. The first thing Jason changed was his eye contact. He realized that most people avoid sustained eye contact, especially when they feel nervous or inferior. So, Jason started practicing it, not in a creepy or aggressive way but calmly, steadily. He would look people in the eyes when they spoke, and when he spoke, he let his gaze linger just a bit longer than necessary. Not with a glare, but with full presence. At work, his coworkers began reacting differently. That one guy who used to talk over him in meetings now hesitated, looking over at Jason before interrupting. People started asking for his opinion more, even though he said the same things he always had. Just that steady gaze changed everything. But Jason didn't stop there. He knew that people read body language long before they processed words. So he took control of the second behavior. Calm, controlled movement. Instead of fidgeting or rushing through doors, Jason began to move deliberately. He walked into rooms as if he owned them, not arrogant, just grounded. He didn't flinch when startled, didn't shuffle his feet nervously, and never played with his phone while waiting. He just stood, observed, and breathed slowly. His co-workers couldn't explain it, but they felt it. Something about him was different. Even his boss, Mr. Reynolds, a man who once barely acknowledged him, started greeting Jason with a nod and using words like sharp and reliable during meetings. The third behavior that Jason cultivated was silence and minimal speech. He noticed that the most dangerous-looking people didn't talk a lot. They didn't explain themselves excessively or try to impress others with words. They spoke only when necessary, and when they did, their words were clear, confident, and to the point. So Jason started doing the same. When someone asked a dumb question, he wouldn't fill the silence with nervous laughter or unnecessary detail. He'd simply answer and wait. That alone made people lean in when he talked. In group conversations, he'd listen more than he spoke. And when he did contribute, people paid attention. Not because he raised his voice, but because his silence gave his words weight. But perhaps the most powerful behavior, the one that made Jason truly dangerous in the eyes of others, was the fourth: emotional self-mastery. He stopped reacting. No more rolling his eyes in frustration or getting defensive. Someone insulted him at work. Jason would smile politely and walk away. Traffic jam. He'd sit patiently, listening to an audiobook. Even when he was angry, he held it in with iron discipline. Not in a repressed way, but with full awareness that he controlled himself, not the world around him. That kind of emotional composure unsettled people. His ex-girlfriend Rachel called him one day after seeing him at the gym. She said he looked different. Not just fitter, but like he was somebody now. He didn't even respond. He just smiled and said, "Hope you're doing well," then hung up. That level of self-control was what tied everything else together. The eye contact, the stillness, the quiet speech. It all radiated power because Jason had trained himself not to be ruled by fear, anger, or ego. He didn't need to prove anything. He didn't need to puff his chest. People could just feel it. And that made him magnetic. And yes, dangerous. One day, a new guy named Blake joined the warehouse team. Young, muscular, loud. The kind of guy Jason used to feel intimidated by. Blake cracked jokes, showed off, and tried to dominate conversations. But around Jason it didn't work. One evening, while Blake was showing off how he could lift a heavy box with one hand, Jason simply walked by, picked up two with zero commentary, and walked off. Blake stared after him. That was the first time Jason noticed it. People not challenging him anymore. Not because he was aggressive, but because they couldn't quite figure him out. And that, he realized, was the essence of being dangerous. Being calm in chaos. Being still while others rushed. Being silent when others boasted. Being present always. A few months later, Mr. Reynolds offered Jason a team supervisor role. It wasn't just about experience anymore, it was about presence. Jason didn't yell to get his team's attention. He just walked in, locked eyes with people, and gave instructions with clarity and quiet authority. Even Blake started following his lead. And the younger guys looked at him like a mentor. Jason had become someone people respected, someone they didn't want to cross. Not because he threatened them, but because he didn't need to. Outside of work, his life changed too. He started training in boxing, not to fight but to maintain discipline. He read more books, dressed better, and walked taller. People greeted him differently on the street. His landlord asked if he was in law enforcement. A barista asked if he was a Navy SEAL. Jason would just smile. He never answered those questions. Because the truth was, the danger people felt around him wasn't about his past. It was about his present. One evening, as he sat at a rooftop bar overlooking the city skyline, a man 2 tables over was arguing with his date, getting louder and more aggressive. Jason didn't interfere. But when the man noticed Jason's steady gaze, he paused. Their eyes locked for 3 seconds. And that was all it took. The man looked away, apologized to his date. And the tension broke like a snapped wire. Jason didn't say a word. But he didn't need to. He remembered a quote he once read. The most dangerous man is the one who has mastered himself. Jason wasn't dangerous in the Hollywood sense of the word. He didn't carry weapons, didn't pick fights, didn't threaten anyone. But people sensed something beneath the surface. A stillness, a presence, an inner power. And in a world full of noise, desperation, and insecurity, that kind of man stood out. That kind of man was respected. As he left the bar that night, a younger guy called out to him. Hey man, you're a little intimidating. Are you military or something? Jason smiled, shook his head, and walked off without a word. He didn't need to explain.